But good morning and welcome to this third part of the series that CI has been hosting on driving organizational effectiveness. This is a series of seminars or webinars that CII organizes really to help its members get exposure to a whole lot of different practices and, more importantly, challenge your thought processes in terms of what could be done in business, how do we make business more efficient and effective. We are living in extremely competitive times, and I think in these competitive times, the more we focus on organization effectiveness, the more healthier our bottom lines and our books are going to look. So this is really part of a continuing series. This is the third session, and the focus today is really going to be about leadership imperatives, a very, very big topic. And I must say there's copious amount of work that has been done around this issue, phenomenal amount of literature available. And we're going to dive in and have a short, quick look at some of those most critical fundamentals that we need to be thinking about. Before I go further, this is going to be, at this point in time, a one-way audio communication where I will run you through, what is it that really differentiates, defines, and builds leadership, and how do we go about doing that. We will open up for questions after this is done. The questions will be done through your interface on the system, and you can just post your questions, and I will try and answer those questions to the best of my abilities. Unfortunately, Mr. Rao had to be away for some other engagement, so you have me here. My name is Ajay Verma. I think a few of you who have been coming on to these sessions earlier would know a little bit about me, but for folks who are on the platform today and listening to us for the first time, my name is Ajay Verma. As I said, I've spent 3 decades almost in business environments, in large corporate environments. I work with organizations from the US and from Europe, and I've run organizations of different sizes, different geographies. My last role was as a corporate VP for a French company, and I was responsible for running a business across India, ASEAN, and Australia, New Zealand. Currently, I work on a lot of consulting projects and work with different organizations. Had leadership positions all across, but more importantly, I've always been very intrigued and very challenged with this whole concept of leadership. And I think I'm going to try and share with you a few of our thoughts in terms of what leadership is all about. But let me first begin by sharing with you a very, very interesting quote, I think, which to me is a summation of what leadership is all about. This is a quote by Dwight Eisenhower. Some of you may remember him. He was the 34th president of the US. And interestingly, today is his birthday as well. He was born on 14th October, And he has this brilliant, statement which he made, which, like I said, is a great summation of what it is all about. He says, leadership is the art of getting someone to do something you want done because he wants to do it. I'm going to go a little slow once again on this so that we get the import of this. Leadership is the art of getting someone to do something you want done because he wants to do it. And I think that's a brilliant way of putting the whole subject in context. Yeah, leadership is a very different animal. It's a very different world. And we're going to start today by looking at a few different things. So once again, welcome. And I think, very strong belief that leadership is really about getting people around you successful. And it's not about, doing things, but it's really about helping people do things. And that's a very, very critical element. My observation also has been that, there are a lot of leadership challenges that you see around the world in corporate organizations of all sizes, hues, natures, industries, verticals, geographies. There is a leadership challenge out there, and I think in our own way, we're going to try and highlight a few things that I think can really go a long way in terms of addressing this issue. So just a little bit about who we are. We are an organization organization called Strat to Results. Our focus is really helping businesses deliver results. Just a few examples of some of the work that we've done working with a very, very large industrial automation organization. We help them drive 2x of market growth for 2 consecutive years now. So they were very clear. The leadership was very clear that they actually wanted to grow double the market rate, and we've helped them do that for the 2nd year in succession. In fact, the year just closed about 14 days back. September was their year close. Another very interesting change management program, which encompassed about 7,000-8,000 people. NPS is a index that you use to really look at how you're doing as far as customer perspective is concerned. So NPS basically stands for Net Promoter Score. Some of you may be familiar with it, some may be using it in your organizations, but it basically hinges on the fact that in today's world you want customers to be promoters and not just be satisfied and loyal customers. So this company was really in a bit of a challenging situation. Their NPS score was floundering at 19, and an intervention over 7,000 to 8,000 people and counting. We've got them, actually the number that we have, which again came in last month, is actually it went from 19 to 43, and now it's gone to 57. Best in class in their industry, and their best track record anywhere in the world. So this is with this thing. Work with a very interesting auto ancillary company. It's actually a tier 1 supplier, and they have this concept of 4 walls. 4 walls fundamentally means that 4 different dimensions of business that they want to look at, and we help them actually do a significant growth, and again help them be top of the heap in their global environment as well. So not that we work only with global companies, we'll work with a lot of Indian companies as well. That's what we try and do, focus really on sales operations, sales execution, and business execution. So that's what we do. But yes, leadership is a fundamental pillar which is required for any of these to happen. So what we're going to cover today, 2 key things. One, what are the fundamentals, right? As I said, it's a subject about which much has been spoken, much has been written, and much will be written and spoken in the future. But we're going to try and take a quick little snapshot and fundamentally start looking at, how do you evolve to become a leader versus being a good manager? And not to say, good managers are not of much value. They are very critical. But leadership is something beyond just that. And I think to me, a lot of it comes from your mindsets, how you think. We'll look a little bit into what are the attributes and a few styles. You've got to also remember that fundamentally leaders are very malleable. They will evolve, they will change, they will engage in various different fashions with different people. And I think that's going to be a very key element as well for us to understand. It's not one single humongous, whiteboard where everything happens in one particular fashion, but it actually has a lot of nuanced behaviors that exhibit. And then of course a little bit on competencies. But since I started off with that quote of Dwight Eisenhower, in terms of saying that how do you get people to do what you want them to be done, but they do it because they want to do it for you. Yeah. So a lot of it is about leading others. And we're going to look at a little bit of a framework which I'm going to share with you, and towards the end of my sharing this information, I'll also give you a very simple toolkit, if you were to so call it that, where you can start assessing how are you on the leadership matrix and what are the areas that you may need to look at addressing. So let's look at leadership from a very simple paradigm. Leadership is no destination. It's a journey that you constantly do, right? And it starts with fundamentally leading yourself. And you have to, the other thing which has happened over the last few decades is initially there was a lot of focus on the values that you brought as a leader. But growingly, there is a lot of thought process that leadership is not just about the values, it's about the values in action. It's about the actual behavior that a leader conducts and not about what his fundamental values are. So I might have all the right values set, but if my actions are not supported by that, then I think you are missing a big trick in terms of really moving up this evolutionary phase. And then of course we talked about the fact that it's really working with others, and that's how you lead others, is when you work with them. And that's really about actions, as I said earlier. But more importantly, at each stage you will have a lot of insights. And every time you will have to go back with those insights and introspect a little bit and start on the cycle once again. Which is why I said leadership is really not a destination, it's a journey, it's a constant process of evolution. It's a process by which you become better every day. Tomorrow's got to be better than today, and today is better than yesterday. In terms of how we work with others and how do we get others to do what they are supposed to do and the direction that we want them to move into. So I think this is very, very important. As you start working on these fundamentals, you will have to constantly do a checkpoint. And to me, one of the important elements is leaders have a very high degree and ability to introspect. Because if you don't introspect, how would you bring about changes that may be required, right? So I think that's really very critical. But let's first get this understanding very clear about leading versus managing. Yeah, I mean, organizations will get people to move up hierarchical levels. Great performers will become manager. Managers will then become manager or managers, and so on up the corporate hierarchy. But does that make everyone a leader? And does somebody automatically become a leader? I think there is a very, very critical difference there, is that one category of people are focused on doing the right things. The other category is focused on doing things the right way, right? No prizes for guessing. The manager is really fundamentally focused on doing the right things, right? Great efficiency, process discipline, result focus, execution ability, the whole 9 yards of it. But I think a leader goes beyond that. He says, what are the right things to be doing? What is it that I need to do for the business? And then getting people to do all the right things, right? So that's really a key difference between being a manager and being a leader. A huge chasm lies between this. We might get to leadership positions, but do we really articulate and exhibit leadership traits is really the question that one has to ask oneself. And I think that again takes me back to my point of saying that it is a lot of introspective process. But let's look at this. You know, in your real world, there are a lot of driving forces that are there, right? And any typical organization, you'll have multiple different forces which propel you forward. Now, these are technology, people, finance, the focus that you bring to business, the infrastructure you create, the processes that you may have. These are the driving forces that typically move and propel a business forward, right? And managers are great at focusing all of this. But this gets you only to your current results. Now remember, leadership is not about driving current results. That a manager can do very well, right? Leadership is about driving, for some of you who would have probably attended one of the earlier sessions when I talked about this whole concept of non-linear growth, which is also the example I shared with you right in the beginning when I was introducing our company, is about growing better than what the market is growing at, creating a new path, a new direction, new goal for the company, which is not linear, which is not the market grows at X%, we're going to grow at X%. You've got to grow non-linearly in today's world, especially if you want to really take leadership positions in your markets. And then obviously that leadership position in the market is going to get driven by leadership within the organization. While this is happening, there are restraining forces. You know, you want to go to a desired result, but there are pressures that are coming to you all the time from the other side, which are creating this problem that between the current and the desired results. And these restraining forces are typically low commitment levels. I would, no might be a very strong word that I used on the slide, but it's about low commitment that you get in the organizations. It's about low levels of teamwork, a fair bit of conflict, without going into and using the word politics, but yeah, a lot of conflict in the organization. Not having vision, I think one of the biggest roles that a leader plays is setting up that vision, and we'll talk about that. And you got to remember, all of this somewhere is connected to trust in an organization. Now, this might sound a little bit like an old worldly statement, but I think trust is the difference between great organizations and average organizations. Organizations who deliver a stellar, superior performance all the time have very high degree of trust within the organization. And a leader's primary role actually comes in there as well. And then of course this whole issue of silos, as organizations have become wider in their offering, in their market coverage, in the solution domains that they operate in, there is a lot of silo operation that started happening in various organizations. So those are your restraining forces, and a leader's job is to look at this gap and say, how do I enhance the driving forces? How do you increase these? At the same point in time, how do you lead to reduce the restraining forces? So the manager's job actually, I would say, is really more towards the bottom of it, though a leader will also focus on that. But more importantly, how do you get all these restraining forces out of your system? That is a very critical element for a leader. So that's really the dilemma that a leader faces, that how do I go about and make sure that I address these issues or these challenges which are leading to suboptimal performance, right? You want to perform at the optimal level that the organization's capabilities are there, and usually you do not operate at the optimal level, and that requires leadership capability of a different order. So let's look at it. Organization greatness, and I did allude to this a little bit earlier, and this I think I also did share in one of my earlier sessions with you folks, is about driving. Great organizations are not about flash in the pan performances. It's about consistent, sustained, superior performance that they're able to drive quarter after quarter, year after year, decade after decade. Now there are a few, there's phenomenal work done in this area, and there are very few clear pillars which define sustained superior performance, and they fundamentally come from having loyal customers. And you can look around in your world and you'll see organizations which have stood the test of time. It's because they have customers who stood by them. But more importantly, it's also about how challenged and how excited employees are working with that organization. Interestingly, I'm actually in a location right now where I was actually running a workshop for a whole bunch of people, typically in the 10 to 15 year experience profile. And interesting thing was, this is for a company which is in a fairly competitive industry space, and they had people who are averagely 8, 9, 10 years in the company, which is a great test for a company. If it's able to keep its employees challenged, excited, motivated, that's a great distinction that great organizations have. And then of course everyone is very clear of what is the contribution I'm doing. It's not about just great salary, great work environment. End of the day, we all seek a purpose beyond all of this. At one level, sure, we all look at the fact that we want better perks, we want better salaries, but it's often said that people leave. Organizations often let down people rather than people letting down organizations. And I think the difference that comes in is where organizations are able to get their employees and people, and in its entirety, able to do some distinctive contribution to people's lives. So I think one of the pillars for achieving all of this is really about focus and execution, and we talked about that earlier. I think that was one of the first sessions that we talked about. But we will really focus, we will spend a little bit to look at this as well. And then of course it's about people. End of the day, every business is about people. It's not about the technology that you take to market. At the core of it, it is about people. And then of course all of this has to be cemented and brought together by great leadership. So if you want to drive your organization to greatness, how is it that you're going to go about? I think it's fundamentally about your mindset, right? And again, very, very simple to state, but I think the Stephen Covey quote is widely, I'm sure a lot of you guys would have exposure to this, is if you want to achieve what you've never achieved before, you simply have to start doing things you've never done before. The challenge that I see a lot of leadership displaying today is that they will set out that this is what we want to do, which is very different, but at the end of the day we go and do the same things, and then how do you expect a different result to come out? This is also what Einstein said in his theory of insanity, is that keep doing the same things, expect a different result. That's insanity. And that's what Mr. Covey is also saying, that if you want to achieve things you'll never achieve, you will have to do things differently. Some things that you have. So a leader is absolutely comfortable moving out of his comfort zone. He's not one who is okay to live in his comfort zone, because as long as you live in your comfort zone, you are going to go and do absolutely what you had done earlier. And no wonder then you will say the results are not what you expected them to be. But the key attributes that define a leader are really about vision. And I think we talked about the fact that distinctive contribution, engage employees. Uh, how does a leader start looking at it? First, he needs to have great clarity of thought himself. Where is it that we want to take it, and why should we take it there? And what is the logic? What is it which will value all my people around? So you require great vision if you want to create a distinctive contribution in the marketplace, or in your organization, or in your personal life as well. And these leadership traits are as applicable to your personal life as they are applicable to your professional world. He's got to have courage. Yeah, because getting out of comfort zone automatically means that you have to have the courage to do something which you are not very comfortable with, which you have not done earlier. And of course, all of this is really a lot driven by integrity. Now imagine an organization which talks about the fact that we have very high integrity standards, but if the leadership team itself is not displaying that in action, it's not going to take you anywhere. Yeah, so you've got to live up to a very, very high moral standard in your actions. Again, I'm emphasizing it's really not about having that moral standard, but actually living it in every single moment of how you go and conduct yourself. The other thing to keep in mind is leaders are under 24/7 scrutiny. A leader never gets a day off. A leader is never not visible. Every action, every communication, everything that a leader does is always under scrutiny. And therefore, integrity is of very, very high requirement. Challenges there, but I think I have great hope and great faith in the basic value system that all of us grow with. And I think somewhere within us, it's all there. And I think because leaders have the courage, they will stay a different and steer a different path altogether. Lots of different examples. Right now, we are seeing very interesting leadership. This thing about the U.S. elections, and without getting into the politics of it, humility. I think that's an art. And if you look around yourself and see leaders who you respect and who you really think are great leaders in their own position, you will find that none of the leaders are really boastful of what they are doing. Yeah. They are usually people with a very humble approach to things. There's very, very important value again, because the leader also realizes that whatever is delivered because of the people around him and not only him. So I think one of the things you have to do as a leader is really move away from this whole thing about the I, me, myself syndrome, and start realizing if you are in that I, me, myself syndrome, my suggestion is go do some reality check. Your leadership journey is not going to be very successful. I'm not saying you're not going to be successful, but will you be respected, looked up to, and be able to lead people to go and do different things? They may do it because of a hierarchical source of power, right? But a true leader never ever leverages the hierarchical source of power. He leverages a personal source of power and influence over people. So I think that's a very important element. And of course, from a business perspective, it's really a lot about strategic planning. He's able to think and envision scenarios. We all understand that we live in a VUCA world today. VUCA is simply volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. That definition comes from military parlance. But yeah, in this VUCA world, whenever you do your planning, you always have certain known unknowns. Yeah, things that you know that you don't know about. But today's world is defined by the VUCA phenomena, where there are a lot of unknown unknowns, and you've got to be very careful of how you're going to do a risk mitigation plan, how do you build agility, and how do you build fluidity in your organization and your plans. So he has a very high ability to make sure that you're able to do plans which will withstand the pressures and the changes that you see happening on a daily basis in our workspace and in our markets. High degree of focus, very driven, and because the leader is driven, he's able to drive that focus in the rest of the organization. So you can't say that, customer centricity is a priority today and then tomorrow go and say, oh, no, we also need to make sure that we reduce cost. Now, I'm not saying that you don't need to reduce cost. Don't mistake me for saying that. But there is a very consistent focus on what you're going to drive. And today's leadership is all about living in a paradox, right? We live in a paradoxical world where you need to increase revenue, but you also need to reduce cost. Where you need to increase customer satisfaction, but you also need to reduce support services cost. That's a paradox that every leader contends with. And great leaders are those who are able to look at this paradox in a slightly different fashion. And they say it's not about this or that. It's about how do we do both together. And the moment you start thinking a little differently, you open up new paradigms of growth. How do we ensure that we are able to do great customer satisfaction at the same point in time? If we save money because our satisfaction levels are higher, how do we start optimizing our support costs, right? And once this cost is there, we will go and reinvest into our product and make sure that our customer satisfaction level goes up. That will allow us again to start reducing customer support costs. So leadership is, great leaders are ones who are able to embrace the paradox and convert it into a new paradigm altogether. Cooperation, execution, absolutely. Leadership is all about people. It's about working and getting people to work for you and work with them. And then, of course, there is a great focus on the execution part of it, because end of the day, that's what delivers results to you. So those are really a few of those attributes that I thought I'd share with you. But more importantly, how does the leader operate, right? And this is just a simple matrix, and there will be nuanced views to this as well. But yeah, there are 4 distinct styles that typically leaders have, right? And not to say one is good, one is bad, not to say that you operate only with one style. A great leader is one actually who's able to move around this whole matrix, right? Coaching requires different skills, different approaches compared to delegating or compared to directing. So a great leader is actually somebody who's able to do all of these at different points with different audiences, depending on, a leader is very good in understanding the person in front. And therefore, he takes on a different role with different people. So let's say there is somebody who needs a little bit of directing. A leader will actually direct that, because at the end of the day, we must also recognize, especially in the corporate world, there are companies that are non-democratic institutions. At the end of the day, the leader has to take the call. So at times, the leader will need to step into the directing framework, right? Where he'll be very direct in terms of defining roles that need to be done, achievements that need to be directed, to be driven. Very clear about giving feedback and a whole lot of other things, right? But then at times he will also step back as he sees the maturity of his team start to increase and say, listen, I'm just there to facilitate. I'm just there to, ask you the right questions so that you can start evolving and coming up with the right answers. And at times, if there is the next level coming up, because leaders are also great in identifying next leaders, right? And they will give them the space and say that, okay, now you run the whole thing, and just make sure that you are inspecting the right elements that are required in the business. But fundamentally, they'll allow you to do what you need to be doing, right? And then, of course, a big part of a leader's role is also to coach. That's how you start creating depth in management and depth in leadership. So a leader doesn't sit in one of these quadrants. He's moving along on all these quadrants at all points in time. And these are some of the behaviors that you will see a great leader going and exhibiting. And in your own personal quest for being a great leader, you've got to constantly analyze that with whom, what is the style I need to have. So that's really what it is all about in terms of leadership style. But let's talk about, so this was really about our internal thing. And we talked about the fact, and I opened up with that quote from Mr. Eisenhower. So let's look at what is it about leading others, because a big part of leadership is about others. So here is a very simple framework that I'm going to share with you. As I usually do, I'm not going to spend too much time on these slides because I'd rather have questions from you and answer those questions. But very simple framework, how you get to lead others. Now, there has got to be method in all of this. Leadership is not about just gut feel. It's about a lot of system process orientation. It's about how do I create something which is going to live on beyond me. It's not about me, but it's about creating and institutionalizing things that are going to really start giving results over a sustained period of time. Remember, we talked about organization greatness as being sustained superior performance. Sustained superior performance comes in when you look at a framework approach and you look at fundamentals being in place. So basically what we are saying is that, a leader has to be able to define a very clear purpose if he wants to lead others. Second, you got to align systems and processes to support this. You can't say one thing in your purpose and have another thing in your systems and processes are not aligned to support that. Then you're certainly going to fail at that level. So leaders are able to go and align systems and processes And then very importantly, they allow everyone to maximize their potential. We all love working for people who give us space to grow, to learn new things, to experiment, to support us when we fail, but coach and guide us. And therefore, leaders really look at that very, very strongly in terms of how do we help people maximize their potential. And this goes back to connect with what I was saying earlier, that if you feel that you're maximizing your potential, then you will, and you have more and more opportunity to enhance your potential, you will tend to stay on with an organization rather than where, there are ceilings and artificial barriers created in an organization. Which takes me to the last point, which is really about how do you create a trusted environment. Now, all of these are interconnected dots and one thing leads to the other, but we're going to spend a little time on examining each of these pillars or these four fundamentals. Defining a clear purpose, and I think this I did allude for people who were there in one of my earlier sessions, is that even execution, even from a managerial perspective as well as from a leadership perspective, having a clear purpose is one of the most critical things. If you're not clear about your purpose, you're going nowhere. The party doesn't even begin. So, every person in an organization is being driven to get results, right? Now, there are two kinds of results two things that drive results, right? One is very clearly executive order, right? Which is about, what are investments going to be in terms of new plant creation, what is the raises that we're going to do, what are the acquisitions we're going to do. These are all executive decisions that you do, right? But there are a lot of things in business, actually more things in business, and these are very easy. These are very simple, right? Executive decisions, you have to take a call, obviously looking at your financials, your resource pool, all of those kind of things. But really what drives great results is ensuring compliance. How customer-centric are we? Is the customer really what we are focused on? A lot of organizations have multiple layers before they end to go to a market, depending on what business you are in. You might have intermediaries. What is the quality of relationship you enjoy with them? Operational efficiencies, product quality, and so on. You can go on a lot about all of this. And this is a challenge. This is not easy. Because this you don't do through an executive order. This is where you get people to start doing things differently, right? And that's where leadership is all about. How do you get people to start looking at things differently? And the fundamental thing is really about having a very clear focus. So and this is something which I very strongly believe in, and we talked about this in the first session that we did, was really that the framework to do great execution comes out of this three simple words, which is what we call the FED quotient. F stands for focus, E for engaged employees, and D for discipline. Now, it's great to have high focus, but if you're employing and discipline, but if your employees are not engaged, not really coming to the party, then you will have incremental results, but you will still have a challenge because the employee's heart, mind, soul is not there. I just don't want him to walk into my office as a warm body, right? If his heart is not there, you're not going to get superior results. You're going to get only incremental results. If you were to look at the fact that you had low on focus, you're low on discipline, you're low on engaged employees, results are going to be a big challenge. The third quadrant is really about very high engagement, but focus is low, discipline is low. So people are very excited, but there is no clarity where we're headed out to, right? There is no method to the madness in terms of the discipline. You will get short-term results, but your systemic issues will start cropping in. And therefore, what really drives sustained superior performance is fundamentally high focus, high engagement, and high discipline. Now, going on to really this focus point, there is enough work done in terms of the fact that, there is a law of diminishing marginal utility or diminishing returns, right? And there is statistical evidence now done after a lot of research that you can go ahead and put goals and a lot of goals, and I know in your organization you put in a lot of goals, but great leaders are not enamored with that. They are very clear that results cannot be driven by this, because what starts to happen is that beyond 3 goals, your actual yield starts dropping, and there is enough evidence. But look at the organizations we work in. I've seen goal sheets which are scary. 12 items in a goal sheet, and I've asked the person as to how is it that he's ever going to go and meet those 12 goals, because it's actually physically impossible to make sure that you'll cover all those things. I'm not talking about business metrics, but I'm talking about the fact that, what is it that you're really rallying around? One of the simplest stories that comes to my mind, and please pardon me if my facts are not absolutely accurate, is I'm reminded about the story of Krishna and who was it? The story of shooting the fish in the eye, right? And I think I think it was Arjun, sorry, my bad, yeah. So, when they went and they were supposed to shoot this fish, and you had to look at a reflection of the fish in the pool of water and actually shoot at the fish and hit its eye. Each one of the brothers would ask, okay, so what do you see? When they had taken aim, what do you see? Right? And everyone had a different this thing, so I can see the ceiling, I can see the water, I can see the bowl in which the water is, and I can see the sky, and so on and so forth. But when Arjun came and said that, what do you see? He was asked, his simple answer was, I see only the fish's eye, nothing else. That's what focus is all about, right? And that's what really, in corporate, we need to really learn from, is that it's great to put various business metrics that you'll keep tracking, but at the end of the day, you've got to be very clear of what are the big transformative goals that you're going to do. So leaders are able to get a huge amount of clarity in the business and align people and resources and assets in the organization to go and deliver to these. So that's as far as focus was concerned. Now this focus is good, but if my organization processes and systems are not, I have a big challenge. Now I know process is a bit of an anathema. I think process compliance and process adherence is a challenge. You go to any organization, and I spend a lot of time with various organizations. The challenge, most people say, why can't I do the right things because of process? But we got to realize that process is something which brings about a standard operating process and brings about sanity, brings about a standard way of how we operate. It also is great and very critically required for risk management, risk mitigation. But what a leader does is actually he makes sure that all of these are aligned to the goals that we set. Right, and I think there are two ways of looking at it. One is that, and that again to me the negative situation is more of the manager, right? If you think that, I'm going to do everything, I'm going to make sure adherence to and compliance to process occurs, it's really not going to take you too far. I think it's really about how the leader views these processes and ensures that he creates a system whereby long-term goes on, right? And it's really about those 2-3 important metrics that you want to drive, or your business goals that you want to drive, because leaders are always pushing at non-linear growth. How does your team or your organization spend time on those critical things? So here are the building blocks to actually going and doing this. One is fundamentally identify what is the process that is connected to the focus that you have, and look at what are the tasks that entail that. Make sure it's very well mapped to every single process owner in that, and look at what are the inflection metrics that are there, right? And I'm going to share you a little bit about the inflection metrics as well. And then evaluate, reevaluate, and continuously improve. And this is a cycle that you keep going again and again and again. So there is interesting work done in terms of the fact that leaders are great in identifying what is called vital behaviors, right? Vital behaviors are simply behaviors that have a disproportionate impact on results. Now, in fact, there is a very good book, if you guys are interested in that, you should read a book called Influencer, a very, very powerful book, because a leader's fundamental job is to influence others. And that's a consistent theme we've been talking about for the last 40 minutes now, is that he is influencing people to do the right things. So, for example, if you were to look at, every company is challenged with the fact that on-time project, especially those of you who are from a project or program management kind of a thing, where in your businesses you do a lot of program management and process and projects. The biggest challenge in these kind of environments is how do we deliver projects on time, on schedule, and on budget, right? Every organization is challenged. There was research done as to what distinguishes organizations that are great on on-time and on-cost performance delivery versus the others who weren't. Now, interestingly, they found one key vital behavior which has a disproportionate impact on the results you get. And it's really not about discipline, it's really not about anything else, it's not about adherence to the process or the project timeline or all of those kind of things. It actually, this is a research done over tens and thousands of people in those kind of businesses. The vital behavior is actually all about having open, candid conversations at the project planning stage. If you are able to create an environment where people are absolutely open and candid when the project plan is being made, then there is a very, very high chance that your project is going to come in on time, on schedule. How well are you able to take disparate viewpoints? How are you able to take contrarian views that people may have, assimilate into your whole program, and then go and execute? So that's just an example which I wanted to share with you of these vital behaviors. So leaders are great in identifying vital behaviors which drive disproportionate impact to whatever the process is leading up to. So a great system is one which, as we talked about, is aligned to your goals. It allows people that clarity of what am I going to do, because interestingly, and I think I've shared this as well, is that if you are not clear, people will never be clear. And if they never be clear, they'll never be able to give their best. So I think that's really very, very critical. And that's a great part about leaders, that it's really not the leaders who do anything. It's the processes that they put in which allow the performance and their operation to be driven, right? And as I've been saying earlier, it goes well beyond what the leader's life in the system or an organization will be. So I think that's really what great systems are all about. Quick look at what about maximizing potential. Well, I think everyone needs to be felt valued, right? And again, I'll quote Mr. Stephen Covey, the call and need of a new era is for greatness. Tapping into the higher reaches of human genius and motivation requires leader to have a new mindset, a new skill set, and a new tool set. Leaders are always looking at these aspects. They're always thinking about, how do I get my people aligned in a different manner? How is it that I get them to do what they haven't done earlier? How is it that I get my people to come out of their comfort zones and start driving things that they have never achieved in their life? Because if people in your organization start doing that, then your results are going to be definitely disproportional to what the effort you would do. They'll be much, much higher. And I think it's really about unleashing potential, and therefore leaders are able to connect with people in very, very different ways. And again, I will go back to what I started with. A leader will be able to get people to do what he wants because they want to do it, not because he's asking them. And at times he won't even ask. It's just that people will be energized, engaged, challenged, and feel valued within the organization to go and actually deliver these totally different results. Key element here is, how do you help unleash potential, is basically by the conversations you do, right? And I think there are three different kind of conversations that a leader typically has. And a leader will always try and convert the conversation that he has into either of these three buckets. So it will either be a conversation which is an affirmation conversation, where actually you make sure people feel empowered, they feel worthwhile, they feel that their potential is great, and the leaders will always help people go back, energize, and listen, hey, I'm going to go and do something different. I think the organization believes in me, and therefore I want to do this for the organization or for the leader. And then very clearly, it's about a lot of clarity. This performance and clarification of expectations and all of that goes back to the whole point we were talking earlier about focus. Great leaders are always able to steer everyone back to the same goal. Because you got to remember, in your work environments, there are a lot of other forces at play. We talked about the disruptive forces. But a leader is always able to marshal people and make sure that their expectation is clearer and clearer. Because that clear expectation gives additional motivation to people. And then, of course, accountability is important. We are all part of organizations where there has to be a high degree of accountability. But more importantly, he is first accountable to his own this thing. So I'll give you a very simple, it may sound like an inane example, but if I think I'm a leader and I have a team of people who work with me, or maybe not even a team of people, uh, and I've told you that, okay, this is an issue that I'm going to revert to you by next Tuesday, you know, by, by, by lunch we'll be done with this issue, we'll take a call. Now a leader will make sure that he will walk the path himself. It's not that he's going to come back on Wednesday and give you, because if I as a leader go ahead and tell it on Wednesday, it gives a reason for the other person when he tells me that he's going to do something for me by Wednesday to do it by Friday. So I think this accountability first starts with an accountability to yourself, and then it becomes accountability to others. And I think that's really a key element. And I think a leader is a great support for people. Yeah. We live in times which are becoming very materialistic, but I think if you were to go and look at your own experience of working with different people, different leaders at different points in time, the great ones that you always will be remember are people who connected with you personally, right? And I think, I know in large organizations not very difficult, but at least in their direct influence, they are very, very well connected. I think, Indian business houses are a very interesting example of how important a family connect, for example, is. And typically a lot of Indian business houses at the top management level with the owner entrepreneur have a very, very strong connect. So I think you need to, the organization has to be a part of your support system. And I think that's what leaders are able to go and demonstrate to their people as to the fact that the organization will stay with them. I told you earlier, leadership is a 7/24 job. You are on scrutiny all the times. People are examining, doing postmortem, doing dissection of every word that you say, every action that you take. And I think that's what you got to be conscious of as a leader. You can't have a low moment, and that low moment will not occur if you have the fundamental clarity in your own minds and in people and how you build it within your leadership teams in your organization or your top management team. So I think that's really what it is about. And like I said earlier, a great leader is one who's looking at converting every conversation into one of these kind of conversations, either an affirmation, confirmation, a conversation about performances, and a conversation about how we will support whoever is doing what they're doing. So I think that's really about it. Gets me to pretty much the last point in the whole thing, which is about creating a trusted environment. You may say, Ajay, there's a lack of trust in organization, in society at large, and I wouldn't disagree too much with you. That's why we see so much strife around the world. But the challenge is that lack of trust in an organization is like poison, and it corrodes the ability of an organization to create collaborative environments. You don't have a collaborative environment, you'll never be able to deliver any kind of success. Yeah, because organizations are structured in a manner where everyone has to work with each other. So I think a very, very important role of a leader is to create trust within the organization. Why is trust so important, right? We've always talked about the part that, great strategy, great execution is going to give you results, right? But you've got to remember, people follow leaders. They don't follow the strategy. They follow the leader that they trust, right? And then you might have successful. I think all of you will agree that we will not be successful, right? So actually, this is really not how it works. How it will work is when you actually bring in the T element. Great strategy and execution with trust is actually going to give you great results. That's what it is all about. And what trust allows you to do is it allows you to be more agile, if there is trust in the organization, people will not be hesitant coming back to you and saying, hey, listen, we failed on that particular project, or this is the challenge that we are facing right now. Now, what that allows you to do is, and that's my belief always been, that I want bad news to travel faster than good news, because then it gives me that additional time to fix that problem rather than getting to know it late. If there is high trust in an organization, that really happens very quickly, and therefore your speed in your business really goes up. And at the same point in time, if your speed will go up, your cost will come down. That is the dividend that you get when you have high trust in an organization. On the converse side of it, there is a trust tax. If you don't have high degrees of trust in your organization, then you're actually paying a tax for it. It makes things slower, your costs will go up, And we all know what that means in terms of actually business results. So I think that's really what it is all about. Again, there is interesting research done on this that, a 10% improvement in trust actually leads to a 35% improvement in pay, which is because the company performances go up. So that is how critical trust is. And trust is very ephemeral. It's not easy to define, right? It's a lot of things. It's not just about character. It's not just about competence. It's a lot of things that come in between. And I think this to me is really what defines trust. It's made up of both competence and character. Character is a foundation. And I've been talking about the fact that all of these have to be foundational. And we talked about integrity, we talked about intent, we talked about capabilities, and obviously you got to drive results. Capabilities and results are really the top of the thing that you see, right, which is really the competence frameworks. All of your organizations would have different competence frameworks. But it's really the character which are the roots, and if the character is weak, then you'll have a problem in your competencies as well. You might have great metrics that you put in place for competence building, capability building, but you still run into problems there. So this is what it is about, a quick primer of what you could do to build trust in your organization. There is a very interesting couple called Dr. Michelle Rayner and Dr. Dennis Rayner. And this couple used to work with specially able children. Now, unfortunately, there are, at times, God or whoever makes children actually wires them a little wrongly. And they used to work extensively with these children. Working with these children, they realize that it's not one single kind of trust. It's not a homogeneous mass. There are actually three different kinds of trust. There is competence trust, there is communication trust, and there is contractual trust. So I'll give you a simple example of how this would play out. So let's say there is a child out there who doesn't walk. I first need to validate whether the child has the competence to walk, right? There are no neurological issues, no physiological issues. The inherent competence to walk is there. I then go and tell the child, listen child, walk 3 steps and I will give you a candy. So I do the communication and I do a contract. You do this, I will do that. The child walks 3 steps and I can hope that next day I can come and walk and tell the child, listen child, walk 5 steps today and then I'm going to give you a candy. But imagine a situation where the child walks 3 steps but I don't give the child a candy. So it's really not about practicing 1 of the 3 or 2 of the 3, because if I don't give the candy, the child the next day would definitely not even walk 1 step for me. So I think that's really what it is about. When you work on all these 3 dimensions, when you start building your capacity and capability within the organization for trust. Now here are a few things that you could do, right, to build trust on all these 3 dimensions. And I think it's very, very simple. Acknowledge people's skills and competencies. Great trait of leadership. That's how you build trust in the organization. Allow people to take decisions. Involve everyone, right? Help people become better than what they were yesterday. Share information. Yeah, I agree. There is, sometimes we get into the mode of need to know basis, but I think today people are well informed. Grapevines are much stronger in organizations than formal communication networks. Sharing of information is very, very critical in making sure people are aligned. Tell the truth, admit mistakes. I think, the humility in a leader will always allow him to say, listen, hey, I made a mistake. It's okay. Which gives other people the confidence that it's all right to make mistakes, because after all, we are all human. We are not superhuman, right? So I think these are very, very simple things. Keep agreements. Be consistent. Yeah, you can't suddenly start changing goalposts. So you got to follow these basic simple trust behaviors, and that's where you start building up the whole cohesive framework that we talked about. Is in terms of how do you lead others? Is really by defining a clear purpose, aligning systems and processes in your organization, in your business units to the goal that you have, the clear purpose that you have, and then of course allowing people to maximize their potential. They'll be able to maximize their potential once you create a trusted environment. If you can't, all else will fail. So very clearly, leadership has a lot of things to be done, a lot of fundamental issues there. I haven't really gone on a very standard textual model, but this is more really in terms of our own learnings and our own introspection and our own work done on the leadership space with a lot of different companies. And this is what I wanted to share with you. I told you right in the beginning, I'll give you a takeaway on this one very clearly. I actually have a full questionnaire. Okay, this is just a snapshot of that, which is your self-assessment questionnaire. You know, how do you say where you are? Not only that, it'll also tell you what are the areas you need to focus on. What are the areas you need to work upon to move on this whole evolution of being a better leader today than I was yesterday. So in case any of you guys want this, just pop me a mail. There are 50 such questions out there, and I'll tell you how is it that you're going to use this tool set, which is for your own self-leadership assessment. And you can write it to me at the address that I've given here, and I'll revert back to you. So with that, I'm ready to now take on questions. Like